So first thing is that you should keep the model as simple as possible. You should keep it very clean. For that means that your assumption page, your P&L, your balance sheet and cash flow statement should be in separate page. You should use color coding. By color coding, I mean that historical financials should be in a different color, let's say blue, and forecasted numbers should be in a different color. So there is a clear flow to the particular model.
Hi everyone, I would just like to welcome everyone to the one-on-one session with Thought Leader by Seekho, and we have Prithvi Sehgal with us here today. So welcome, sir. And just for everyone watching, Seekho is the first micro-learning based community wherein you can learn just about anything you want in a minute. So in short, what it's trying to do is make a world where knowledge meets seekers. And Prithvi, we are so glad to have you here today. For everyone who's watching, Prithvi is an experienced investment executive with a history of working in mergers and acquisitions, and he's currently a management consulting analyst in Accenture. And rather than me speaking about you, I would like you to take the stage and just give a short introduction about you and what it is that you do. So please, if you could do that.
Okay. Hi, Ria. So, typical Delhi guy, born and brought up in Delhi, did my graduation from Hindu College. Post that, worked in a startup for around 6 months, got admission into XLRI. I did my specialization in finance and strategy over there. I was always inclined towards finance, so I always also was a part of the student investment fund. Post that, I got a pre-placement offer from Aditya Birla Group, where I joined in as a management trainee. I had 3 different stints. One was in Ultratech Cement, another was with the corporate economics cell, and finally with the corporate finance group, which looks after mergers and acquisitions across the all 6 companies that come under Aditya Birla Group. And post that, I wanted to change my journey a little bit from investment to consulting. And that is when I transitioned to Accenture, where I joined as a management consulting analyst.
All right. Thank you so much. We are glad to have you here today, and thank you for giving us your time. And so if you have any questions, then feel free to ask. Otherwise, we'll jump into our session.
Sure. We can do it anyways. In case you want to ask me questions first, then we can go like that, and then post that. In case I have any questions about Seekho, I can clarify it from you.
Sure, that sounds good. So just to let you know, what we'll be doing first is we have a short segment called Rapid Fire, which is broken down into 2 sections. The first will be just a couple of questions where I shoot questions. These are fun questions just to sort of break the ice and for you to have fun. I'll throw them at you, and whatever comes in your mind, you can feel free to answer. And then the next segment is the swipe left and swipe right, which is just a couple of categories, about 5 categories I'll be asking you about, and you will be just letting me know your opinion by just saying swipe left, which means it's sort of like a thumbs down, and a swipe right, which is sort of like a thumbs up. So are you ready to go into the rapid fire round?
Yeah.
All right. So the first question I have for you is, what was your dream job as a kid?
I would probably say an investment banker, because my father is a chartered accountant, and as he has always, inclined me towards pursuing the CA.
All right. And if you could win an Olympics medal for any sport, okay, real or made up, what would it be?
I think it will be running.
If you were to choose one book that you would recommend everyone to read, what would that be?
Intelligent Investor by Warren Buffett.
The next question I have is that if you could interview any celebrity, who would it be and why?
It will be Subramaniam Swamy.
One life lesson that you have learned and you would like to share with us?
That you should always be open to things. You should always keep your mind open.
All right. Sounds great. So let's move on to the next section, which is swipe left or swipe right. So the first is Zoom meetings.
Swipe right.
All right. What about traveling?
Swipe right.
Gaming?
Swipe right.
Corporate life?
Swipe left.
And cooking?
Swipe left.
Thank you so much for indulging in this session with us. And let's move on to the question and answer round, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So like we spoke about, and how you also said that you are currently in Accenture. So how did you make it to the management consulting analyst role in the company? And what would be your key tips as to how you cracked the interview for this particular role?
Okay. So first, the most important thing is getting your CV shortlisted. So in order to get your CV shortlisted, obviously you cannot change your past. So you should present it in the most accurate and in the most easy manner as possible. So it is good to have good academic credentials. It is good to have overall, value building, which can be in terms of your communication skills, because that is something which is very important in consulting. There should be also something on your CV which. Another thing is that in consulting, typically there are case interviews, and in order to crack that case interviews, you should practice them a lot. So what I did is, there is a case book which is given by Ahmedabad. I had both the 2019 and the 2020 edition. I went across all the cases in both those books. I also learned about the methodology of how those cases were categorized. So for instance, in some cases, there are market entry cases. In some cases, there are profitability analysis cases. In some cases, there are supply chain analysis cases. And the way you deal with all these cases differentiates, because there are different frameworks in order to deal with a specific set of problems. So that is another important part. After you have done that, I also went to YouTube and watched some case studies which are given by Bain, BCG, regarding how you can actually in an actual real life case interview, you can how you can solve those particular cases. And the third thing that I did, I practiced with some of my friends who were in management consulting or were my XLRI batchmates, so I could hone my consulting skills.
Thank you. I think that'll be really helpful for anyone who's looking to get into such roles. And you spoke about case interviews, and that is actually what my second question was about. While I think you've covered a lot, let me still ask you and see if there's anything you want to add to that. Otherwise, we can move on to the next question. But my question exactly was that for case interviews, what is your advice, and how do you say that people can prepare for them?
Okay, so one important thing while doing a case interview is, don't muck the methodology to solve a particular case. Okay, you should be open to the possibility that a case might come that you have never done in the past, on which any framework won't apply. So the framework is a method to solving a case, but you should not be solely dependent upon that. So that is foremost thing. Another thing is, while you're giving the interview, it should not imply that you are using a particular framework, because then it would mean that you have mucked up a particular thing and then you are doing that particular analysis, and that goes against you, because then the interview might set you off by providing another set of difficulty in that question that you might not be able to answer. So those are the two important things that you should keep in mind before preparing for a case interview.
Got it. And as per your experience, right, so for the role of management consulting analyst, what are the skills that you think one should be prepared with when aiming for this role? Like, what skills come in handy?
Okay, so in my role, it is very important that you are able to go through the balance sheet and the annual reports of the company, do the financial analysis. So you should be literate enough to read the financial statements. Second thing, you should be able to analyze those financial statements in terms of removing any exceptional items that are part of your P&L or balance sheet, having the skill to identify them. Another thing would be that you should be proficient in Excel, and you should be able to do your ratio analysis. So one methodology that is followed in Accenture is that they break up the return on investment capital into two parts, which is your profitability and your asset turnover. Okay, and then these components are further broken down into your revenue side, your cost side, within cost into your cost of goods sold, your SG&A, and similarly on the asset turnover side. So if you have those kind of skills, and if you have done DuPont analysis, that is again an important factor. And the third thing is that as in your career you progress, you also develop financial models. So if you have that kind of financial knowledge, that certainly helps, because at the end of the day, when you are providing a consulting solution to a client, either it might be to generate revenue, okay, and if you're generating revenue, you have to invest something. So that is why you should be able to tell the client clearly that if you're offering a solution, what is going to be the financial impact of that particular solution. I think that is very important.
Got it. And since you were talking about financial solutions, and so moving on from there, sort of picking up from there about financial models, since you also have experience in developing financial models, what would you say is your advice to develop a perfect financial model, and what would you say needs to be kept in mind while developing one?
Okay, so the first thing is you have to keep your basics in the right direction. It does not matter how many macros you know or how many complicated formulas you know by using indirect and offset function. That does not work, because at the end of the day you are presenting your model to top management, and if the model is too complicated, then it's as good as not preparing a model at all. So first thing is that you should keep the model as simple as possible. You should keep it very clean. For that means that your assumption page, your P&L, your balance sheet and cash flow statement should be in separate page. You should use color coding. By color coding, I mean that historical financials should be in a different color, let's say blue, and forecasted numbers should be in a different color. So there is a clear flow to the particular model. And also your assumption sheet is very important. So while preparing your assumption sheet, you should ensure that you are leaving certain cells in the beginning. So in case if you want to use those particular cells because of adding any assumptions to your model, it should not be that you're moving the entire model by adding another row or column. And the third thing is, once you have prepared a model, applying a sense check is very important. You can do a sensitivity analysis, you can do a scenario analysis, so as to ensure that your model is pen and proper. And one more thing that you can do, if you have access to them, is going through certain analyst reports and look at how they have valued the company. What is the valuation drivers for that particular industry according to that analyst? And then, maybe taking some insights for them and seeing, at least taking an alternative point of view before you arrive at a particular conclusion.
Got it. I think those were really specific points that will really help people who are looking to make financial models. So thank you for that. And while I'm touching upon your past experience, you also have had some experience in drafting legal agreements, if I'm not wrong. So how can one develop a strong and perfect legal agreement? And again, what are the things not to be missed while making one?
Okay, so for doing anything strong, which is for any financial modeling or creating legal agreement, the only thing that you can do is practice a lot. Another thing is how you can practice is that these mergers and acquisitions agreement or these spin-off agreements are available on the listed company's website. Either they are available in BSE, NSE, or the company themselves provide them. So it is very important that you download them, go through them, and understand what are the key clauses. Now, coming on to the key clauses, for example, in a typical shareholder agreement or a share purchase agreement, the rights of shareholders are very important. So, for example, in case I am a company A, which is acquiring company B, and I am going to be the majority shareholder in that particular company with a 51% right, it should tell me that in case there is a dispute which is going to arise between company A and company B, what is going to happen? What is the dispute resolution process? Okay. Because what might happen is, even if I am a majority shareholder, there might be certain key employees in that particular company that if they leave that particular company, I might be in a situation that I cannot run company B. Which comes to the second thing, that there should be enough clauses with respect to the employment of key management personnel that should deter them from leaving the organization if it ensures that the organization itself would deem to become non-existent. The third thing is that you should be very careful about debt items and any liability that can come in the future, which can be in form of a contingent liability or which can be in form of an indemnity. Now, in case of indemnity, what happens is that there might not be a liability on the books of the company. It might not be a liability that might seem material in the present. But what might happen in case of an adverse agreement, let's say in the court, that liability might come to the company, and that make the entire investment unviable. So it is very important that you ask the prior owners to indemnify you for such loss that you haven't taken into consideration the valuation amount that you have come upon. So these are some of the key things that you should remember while drafting a legal agreement.
Great. So moving on to another role that you've been in, which is market and sales strategy, had one or two questions about that. Firstly, how can one design a great marketing strategy according to you?
Okay, so this was a brief moment in my career when I was experimenting in consulting. I also wanted to try sales and marketing. So I have not done any sales and marketing specialization, but whatever 2 cents I have about real estate marketing, I'll just tell that. So in real estate marketing, location is very important. In case your location, so basically they say location, and that is where the buck stops. So after you have taken into account location and you know that this product is great, the surroundings are great, there are a lot of amenities in that particular region, there is good connectivity. So you do a comparable analysis of what this property might be valued at basis on some of the other projects that might be coming in that particular neighborhood. Okay. Once you have done that, another important consideration in sales and marketing strategy comes around price and sales velocity. So for instance, I place my property in an area which is very up and coming, but I price it at a price which is higher than my peers. Okay, so I might get a higher margin, but at the same time my sales velocity might take a hit. Okay, so if my sales velocity take a hit, as I've explained you the right concept, it is either affected by margin or it is either affected by asset turnover, how quickly you utilize your assets. So you are sacrificing one thing or the another. A typical sales strategy would be best, which maximizes, or which tries to create a balance between both these elements in order to maximize your ROI. So my prices should not be as high that it deters the customer to make the decision at the right time or as quickly as possible. At the same time, my prices should not be that low that even though the turnover is high, I might end up with a little share or little return on my investments. So those are the two key points. And the third aspect, which is again in terms of marketing, in real estate marketing, there are primarily three levers that we pull. The first lever that you pull is your digital strategy. The second lever that you pull is your physical marketing, which is your hoardings, whether your hoardings are at the right place, whether the display is right. The third thing is your, contact centers in place, because in real estate, contact centers play a huge role in communicating to the customer and creating that databases to reach to the right type of customer at the end of the day. So if all these three strategies are right and you're targeting the right person, you have the right database, then I think it makes a lot of difference in going with the real estate marketing strategy.
Got it. And like you said, it was a brief time, a period of time where you were in the marketing and sales strategy. But I had another question related to sales strategy. Let me know if you have anything to add to that. I just wanted to ask you, what are like some of the basic tactics that should be used while devising a sales strategy?
So yeah, I can give you, what I did. So if I wanted to devise a sales strategy, I visited the competition. I visited the competition as a customer who was buying a house. Okay. So once I visited the competition as a customer who was buying the house, then I think what are the factors that are important for me when I'm making this purchase decision? And I'll ask the salesperson, okay, you give me an overview about this particular property. You tell me what are the price you're going at. You tell me what is the maximum discount you can give. I tell them, okay, if I make the payment early, in case I can get any discount. Okay. And so that really helps of going on ground of what the property market looks like. The second thing is we also depend upon certain external databases like PropEquity, which gives me a micro market analysis, which tells me, okay, these are the properties in this particular area or surrounding lookalike areas, and this is the sales velocity and this is the ongoing price in those particular locality. So if I can create a map, I used to take out a snippet from the Google Maps and then used to mark those properties, their amenities and their price and their sales velocity. It used to give me an overall view of how I should place this particular product in this particular market and what is the price I should derive at. And in that sense, there might be certain asks from the customer themselves when I'm visiting these locations. So, some of the problems that people face in Mumbai, of people especially who are living in Kalyan or Thane or suburbs, office connectivity is a great difficulty. Now, if I'm coming up with a residential property, but at the same time, I know that this is an up and coming residential area, which will require commercial or lifestyle amenities also in the future, like a mall, like a theater. So I would take those recommendations and we would actually recommend the developer if that is something that we can look into in order to enhance the value of the property. So those are the things that I keep in mind when I'm devising the strategy, or how do I execute a strategy on ground.
Got it. Thank you. And I think you've explained it really well, because I don't come from a background of sales or marketing, but I was, able to understand what you were talking about. So thank you for that. And sort of going back to talking about you being a financial analyst, I wanted to ask you, how does being a certified financial analyst, pave new opportunities for you?
Okay, so CFA is a very good degree. So what I tell people is, if you want a career in investment banking or private equity, okay, those kind of jobs, because those are the jobs in finance that pay well versus accounting or general supply chain finance. So for that, CFA can be a very important degree because it is different from CA. CA focuses on accounting with a certain impetus on financial analysis or valuation, but CFA is centered around valuation and also some other aspects around treasury market or money market. So if you are pursuing, and if you are a college graduate, just enter into college, getting a CFA, if you want to have those kind of jobs, becomes a very important benefit over and above your peers. So that is point number one. And again, your duration of a BCom course is 3 years, and I think there is enough bandwidth available to complete CFA during that time duration, versus if you are pursuing, let's say, engineering, in that case CFA becomes a little difficult to pursue because that course is entirely different of what you are studying. So for a commerce graduate like me, it becomes easy to get into CFA and then clear those examinations during the course of my undergraduation. But it certainly, I've heard about people who just did their graduation and did CFA and then started at an early age. They just joined the Big Four, did transaction advisory over there, then went to an investment bank, Lazard, and then post that from Lazard to Nomura to other, because at the end of the day, your experience matter in that particular industry. So it gives you a very strong advantage. However, when you are pursuing it after your post graduation or while you're working, the amount of value that degree can add might deteriorate, because what happens is that once you are in a particular industry or you're working in a particular industry, let's say sales and marketing, and then you want to pursue a career in, let's say, finance, investment banking, and then you want to use CFA in order to bridge that. But the probability of that happening is lower versus you taking that course in the initial part of your career.
Understood. I just wanted to ask you, we are nearing the end of the session, so this is sort of my second last question to you, and I wanted to ask you, what are some tips from your journey? As we saw, you have experience in so many things, so you've had this long journey in sort of different domains and sectors. So from your journey, what are the tips that you have for young aspirants as to how to plan their career when aiming for consulting?
Okay, so one important thing is that you should be open to new things. It should not be that you're willing to do a certain kind of work but you're not willing to do another kind of work, because assignments in consulting fluctuate a lot. At one point of time you're doing a market sizing exercise, another time you are analyzing the financial of the company for a supply chain problem, or it keeps on changing. So you should be open enough in order to change yourself according to your surroundings. So that is the thing that is most important. The second thing is that versus other professions, analytics is a very important part of consulting, and analytics, as we know, is changing a lot. Earlier you can only be dependent upon Excel in order to analyze certain problems, but nowadays people are learning more futuristic languages like R and Python, because in order to analyze and visualize that amount of data becomes easier. Even I don't have any command on those languages, but I still want to learn that, because that is the future and that is something that is coming across now. So what I feel is, if you are able to adapt yourself to these future trends, I think that will give you a very good advantage in pursuing consulting as a career. And another thing that I would like to mention over here is that within consulting, it is very important that your communication skills are good. By communication skills, I don't mean you should have a very good vocabulary. It's just that you should be willing to listen to the other person, listen to people, and be patient, and always be ready to ask out for help. That is very important.
Got it. I think these tips will be really helpful for anyone who's, planning to get into consulting, because hearing them from someone who is into consulting themselves will be really helpful for them. So thank you. And I just had one last question for you. So at SECO, we promote the idea of learning every day. And within that context, I wanted to ask you, what is an advice that you would have for students or young professionals in general, that based upon your journey, what have you seen and why do you think learning every day is important?
I think learning every day is important is because as we age, I think that we develop a very mono-dimensional aspect about things. Okay, this is right, this is wrong, and that is not the case. Every question, for every person will have a different sort of an answer, because every person has a different journey. Every person has a different bent of mind of looking at things and analyzing things. Okay, so one thing that is very important, and that too in the current context, that you should be able to listen to other people. You should, debate with other people if you have a point of view. For instance, you can read a particular book, you can join a particular debate club, you can complete that book, and then different people can have different opinions upon that particular book, and then you can actually debate upon them, and that will help you create or think in that analytical sense, that you'll be able to take into account multiple factors when you are deciding upon something, or when you are analyzing a particular problem. So I think that is important. And then another thing is that coming out of your comfort zone is also very important. So doing different things, like for instance, I have never been a very avid reader, but I tried to, I've recently started reading a lot of books. So I tried to ensure, that I read books, but also there is a type of variety in that particular books that I read. Okay, so those are another, because as little as reading Harry Potter at this point of time in my life, that is also something that I'll be willing to do. If it can, it might not have any direct value in in the work that I do, but I think that it gives an alternative point of view, and it develops some kind of other learning that can come across. So I think those are the two things that are really important.
All right. Thank you so much. Those were the questions I had from my end to ask you. And I thought you did really great. I got some really precise answers. And on a personal note, I don't come from a background of finance or consulting, but I was able to understand most of what you were saying, and able to make what I could out of it. And I thought that was great, and I think it'll be great for people who are looking to getting into consulting, or become financial analysts, anything like that. So thank you so much for giving us your time, and I hope that the session went well for you too.
Yeah, I think the questions were really great, and I think simplicity is a virtue that is least appreciated, and that is the thing that we actually do. What I try to do, especially, to keep things as simple as possible, so that everyone is able to relate to them. Otherwise, there's no point giving a lot of jargons that people are not able to understand, and they're not able to absorb anything that you are saying. So yeah, it has been a very good experience.
Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.